Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the regular meeting of the Mayor and Board of Trustees for the Village of Burr Ridge. Today is April 23rd. Our first order of business, of course, is the Pledge of Allegiance. And tonight, we're going to be led by a Pleasantdale Elementary School student named Olivia Santinello. She is according to someone over at the school, Olivia has 3 brothers, and she is the youngest child. Her favorite subject at school is art. She's very active in extracurricular activities. She's a gymnast, dances, impacts, plays softball, Illini, her team, and plays the violin, Pleasantdale Orchestra. She's here tonight with her parents, both of whom are doctors, and they live in Burr Ridge over by the school. Tonight, I'd like to have her lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Olivia. Great job. Karen, can I have roll call, please?
Trustee Francis.
Here.
Trustee Model.
Here.
Trustee Cabeza.
Here.
Trustee Natal. Trustee Snyder.
Yes.
Trustee Schiappa.
Here.
Mayor Straub.
Here. Now the residents' comment section. Are there any residents who would like to address the board this time? Okay, and now on the consent agenda. All items listed with an asterisk are considered to be routine by the village board and will be enacted by one motion. There will be no separate discussion of these items unless a board member or citizen so requests, in which event the item will be removed. Under minutes, we have 5A, approval of regular board meeting of April 9th, 2018. B, receive and file draft local school committee meeting of April 3rd, 2018. Under ordinances, 6A, approval of an ordinance amending section 8B2 of the Burr Ridge zoning ordinance to permit a custom art studio as a special use in a B1 business district at Z09 2018. Text amendment, custom art studio. B, approval of an ordinance granting special use approvals pursuant to the Burr Ridge zoning ordinance to permit a custom art studio in a B1 business district, Z09 2018, located at 306 Burr Ridge Parkway, Hennessy. C, approval of ordinance amending Chapter 25 of the Burr Ridge Municipal Code by adding a new Class S license. Under resolution, adoption of resolution rescinding the withdrawal of the Village of Burr Ridge from the Intergovernmental Personnel Benefit Cooperative and the South Central DuPage County Benefits Pool. 7B, adoption of a resolution approving membership and payment of a promissory note for marketing services to DuPage Convention and Visitors Bureau. Under considerations, we have 8E, approval proclamation designating May 2018 as National Bicycle Month in the Village of Burr Ridge. F, approval of recommendation to order 2 police squad cars included in the fiscal year 18-19 budget for delivery after May 1st, 2018. G, approval of vendor list in the amount of $288,656.76 for all funds, plus $248,026.92 for payroll, for a grand total of $536,683.68, which includes no special expenditures. I have a motion to approve the following items in the consent agenda. That would be 5A and B, 6A, B, and C, 7A, B, and B, and considerations, 8E, F, and G.
So moved. Second.
Second. Roll call, please.
Trustee Model.
Yes.
Trustee Snyder.
Yes.
Trustee Schiappa.
Yes.
Trustee Francis.
Yes.
Trustee Cabeza.
Yes.
5-0.
Okay, first item to be discussed under considerations, 8A, discussion of Burr Ridge address system.
Thank you, Mayor. Let me find my, okay. Just at the direction of Mayor Straub, I've put this on the agenda for discussion by the village board and direction on whether to proceed with addressing the addresses in the village of Burr Ridge. This was discussed in 2004, at which time the village board decided not to take action on changing addresses. The issue relates to the sometimes confusing addresses used in DuPage County, what I refer to as the old DuPage County addresses that have the 15W, 16W prefix, 9S, 10S, 11S prefix north and south. Residents and businesses often find those designations confusing. Sometimes the prefix is left off the address, which makes it even more confusing, because then the block number and house number don't relate to an overall address system. And so there has been, for years, at least even prior to 2004, there's been a lot of requests over time to see if the village could change that address system to eliminate the 15W, 16W, et cetera. What we had proposed in 2004, which I'll just briefly go over, was to make a uniform system on the DuPage County side of the village, following a traditional addressing system. North-south is pretty straightforward, and there's fewer addresses affected by the DuPage County prefixes. North-south, the addresses would actually just follow the street numbered system, 55th Street, so you have the 5500 block, 63rd Street, 72nd, 79th, 83rd, 91st, et cetera. As well, north-south addresses would be addressed 5500 through 9100, 9400 at the far south end of the village. And there are approximately, well, I'll get to the numbers in a minute, but the east-west is a little bit different because you have the two counties. In an east-west direction, the Cook County addresses are fairly uniform, using the block numbers 115 plus the house number, are 112, 113, 114 going from Wolf Road at 11200 to County Line Road, which ends at 11900. And those east-west addresses, none of them would be changed because they aren't affected by the prefixes, the DuPage County prefixes. West of County Line Road, between County Line Road and Madison Street, you currently have a mixture of addresses. The 15W prefix includes the 000 block, first block west of County Line, 100, 200, 300, 400, through 700 blocks. And those are consistent, and it would be simple to simply eliminate the 15W in those blocks and have a consistent progressive addressing system between County Line Road and Madison Street. The challenge comes west of Madison Street, where under the county addressing system, you start over again with 16W 000, 16W 100, 1600 200, et cetera. And in order to create a uniform system of addresses and eliminate the prefix, you would have to change drop the 16Ws west of Madison Street and change the block number. So currently an address that, for example, would be 16W020 would have to become 820 because it would have to pick up at the 700 block of Madison and pick up with the 800 block west of Madison, progressing to the 1100 block at Route 83. You can see there the overall addressing system. And for new addresses and new subdivisions, we have been applying this addressing system throughout the village. And in terms of, just go back there, the number of addresses affected by this plan, it provided what was a list of addresses, and you can see that for the 1500 block There are 317 addresses that would be changed, but again, those are simple changes where they just drop the 15W. The 16W block west of Madison Street to Route 83, 234 addresses would be changed, and those changes are a little bit more significant. As you can see, 16W 445 becomes 1245. North-south, there's only 84 addresses that would be affected. And those are the 10 south, 9 south, 11 south, et cetera. So that is a summary of the situation with the addresses. We're looking for direction from the village board. In 2004, when we considered this change, the first step was to notify affected property owners. In 2004, there were quite a few businesses west of Madison Street that objected to the change. That was the primary reason why the village board decided not to pursue it. The list that I show you is not necessarily up to date. It does need to be updated, so the final numbers could change somewhat, but I don't think the number of affected addresses would change by very much, because these were all existing addresses in 2004, and any new addresses assigned since then, we've tried to conform to the more modern system of addresses in the village. But we would update, if so directed by the board, we would update this list. We would notify property owners that are affected, schedule time for further consideration by the village board, the opportunity for affected property owners to come forward and voice their support or opposition or ask questions about it. And we're looking for your direction at this time.
Let me preface a little bit with this subject has come up many times over the years from both residents as well as businesses. I'd asked him, the board or Doug and his team to actually do some research on it to find out what it would take and weigh the pros and cons of it. I find it to be confusing, especially in my business, because we're at 15 West 256 North Frontage Road, and it's difficult enough to get the right address, and it sounds like you're somewhere out in the country. It almost sounds rural. Is this more indicative of rural?
Generally speaking, I think so.
And also, but really what hit it when I was driving down my street last summer, and we had I noticed a woman a couple doors down. My wife and I were driving down. I caught her in a corner of my eye, and her face is bleeding down actually the right side of her face, from her head across her hair, across her face, and she was elderly, and we stopped to help her, and I called 911 to have call an ambulance, and I gave the address. I think it was, I'm not sure it was 480 or what it was, but I said it's 480 81st Street, and she couldn't find the address. It took me a couple minutes to realize that it's on my street, but the 911 required me to say the 15W, and they couldn't find it. And so that this was not a matter of life and death, but it could have been a matter of minutes and frustration. So I thought, maybe we ought to look into this a little bit further. And so before I open up the discussion for the board, let me ask you, do you know what percentage of properties, of houses and businesses, a decision like this, which is really kind of pain in the neck with stationery and everything else, but what percentage of the residents that it affects?
Well, there's
residents and businesses.
Residents and businesses combined. Karen, do you know approximately how many addresses we have in the village? 5,000?
I thought it was 4,500.
Something like that, yeah.
4,500?
4,500 households.
This affects about less than 1,000.
Okay, so about 20%
20% or so.
of the residents. And the businesses, most of the, some of them are, they're actually all over the place. It wouldn't affect them in the village center.
No.
Cook County is virtually unaffected.
Right, is completely unaffected.
Okay.
No changes in Cook County. The businesses that are affected are those west of Madison Street.
Right.
And in fact, almost all the 16 Ws on this list are businesses. So what are there, what do we say? There were
234.
thank you, 234 addresses in the 16W range, and those are almost all businesses.
And we're tipping the scales of almost 600 businesses now,
Right.
Ridge, so it's more than a third. But okay. Any trustees have questions or clarification? Trustee Pavesa?
Well, similar to what you just said, and Doug, in 2004, the board was in favor of this, making these changes. And we were surprised about the pushback from the businesses and a lot of the residents. And the main reason for the residents too, but the businesses is, people don't like change. Notifying, first of all their paperwork got these addresses on them, all their suppliers, all the government, everybody, they claim at that time it would be too much of a problem to go through and notify all the people of the changes. That was the main problem. The board was for it back then, but we were surprised about the large pushback we had.
I would think also back then we used more letters and letterhead and checkbooks and a lot of things that would require it. Then say a little more digital. It may affect maybe less of an impact, but you never know. And yeah, but good point. And then good historical point. Trustee Model?
Yeah, I tend to, be in favor of it, but would need to hear more from residents and businesses. I mean, sounds like a good idea. I agree with you. It sounds a little more rural or unincorporated or whatever. That's typically where I would expect these addresses. And like you said, times have changed, but we should certainly hear from those folks. I would also think that perhaps it might be more of a benefit now, because we've had some issues with businesses complaining their stuff wasn't getting delivered with the confusion with the zip code Willowbrook, Burr Ridge. This might be one way to help clarify exactly where you are, and it might be actually a good thing for some of those businesses. So, but we'll find out.
And maybe only be done if we get the zip codes changed simultaneously, so there's one change and one change only. Just thinking optimistically. But speaking of which, any updates on that?
My understanding is it's still pending right now.
We're pending appeal. We're looking to get our own zip code, have been for a while, and it's still pending appeal. No further contact. So, yes, Trustee Francis.
Yes, thank you. Thank you, Trustee Pavesa, for bringing us up to date on what transpired in 2004. Appreciate that. So it was mainly pushback and considerations from the residents of the business about the change, about the costs involved and the confusion involved. So I can understand that. The question of staff, would we have to go back and compare the proposed addresses in DuPage County to those in Cook County? For example, there's 79th Street continues in both counties. Would we have to make sure we're not duplicating a number in Cook County, that a proposed number in DuPage County? Would there only be 3-digit numbers?
We would need to check for duplications, but we did that in 2004, and there were just a handful of duplicate addresses in the 16W block, and it wasn't with Cook County, it was further west where you get in the 17W numbers.
Okay.
But there were just a handful, literally 5 or 6 that were duplicates and would have to be changed more than the others would be. But that would be part of the vetting process we'd go through to make sure that.
So thank you. So back in 2004, was it considered at all to have one address system starting at 112, you said, or 115 at Wolf Road, and then continuing that, rolling that all the way west boundary?
No, I don't think it was really given any consideration because of the dramatic change that would be for,
All of DuPage County would change?
all of DuPage County would
Okay.
change their addresses, right?
Okay, very good. Thank you.
And you just remind me of something else. On my street, we never, I forgot that our street has 15W on the title, and we've never used it. So there may be streets like mine that never use the 15W. There wouldn't be much of a change if indeed there was only just a dropping of the prefix. But if it was a different number, that would be a tough thing for anybody to get used to also. Might be more challenging. But it might not be worth it, but, any other thoughts? Trustee Scapa?
Yeah, I also agree with the rest of my fellow board members. I think it'll be a more simple system. I think, if I remember correctly, the 15W and 16W addresses were established when there weren't any maps. You know, we just had to go 15 miles west of State Street and 16 miles west.
That's right.
Now with Google Maps, and I think it'd be a lot easier just to plug in 400 North Frontage Road versus 15W 308. And it is a little confusing. And I noticed on your street, Mayor, that there are some homes with addresses and some regular addresses and some homes with 15W, and that's a little confusing.
Yeah, the older unincorporated areas have sometimes kept the old addresses.
And on the same street.
Yeah.
Which is
Yeah.
very confusing.
We may have to make it like PG or AG. It's pre-Google or after
Yeah,
Google.
yeah. So.
But, yeah, interesting. Anything else? Any other thoughts or direction at the board before I ask the residents? No one? Someone at the board would like to address the board? Any of the residents?
Alice Crampton, 7515 Drew. Just quick question then, how would that affect the unincorporated areas, or does it have to affect them at all? Because I always think of all the 15Ws, whatever, for the unincorporated areas. Do they change, do they not change? Secondly, does this have to be approved by the post office? I imagine my mail now, if I have to change all this stuff, being lost for months. And I also have a problem that our maps will not be updated. They don't update those that often. And I would have a problem with, you know, like, for example, my tax documents won't match, the PIN numbers and the addresses won't match whatever I'm using for my actual address for the postal system.
Alice, you wouldn't be changing your address.
No, I wouldn't, but if people on my block, I mean, we've got a whole bunch of people on 72nd Street that have the, you know, the 15W, blah,
Yeah,
blah, blah.
all
So-
contributing ideas, you're right.
Yeah, so I don't know if the post office, you know, would even just allow us to just change whatever we want to change. So just
Yeah, something else.
unincorporation and postal office question.
I'll look into.
Trying to find out more about.
Yeah, we looked into that in 2004, and the post office at that time had no objections to the changes. We'll look into it again if so directed, if we move forward with this. It would not affect any unincorporated properties at all.
Trustee Scapa?
And also to that effect, this isn't something that would happen overnight. According to the schedule, the implementation schedule in 2004, this is a 10-month process. So it will take time to kind of adhere to all the systems that are
Yeah,
affected.
for it to adjust. And again, the operating ain't over. You know, we gotta jump through a lot of hoops even to get to that point.
Right.
It does affect a lot of residents. So any other, so Doug, what do you advise, recommend, ask
Well,
for?
it sounds like there's no objection to at least proceeding and pursuing this further, in which case, what I would suggest is that we set a board meeting date to reconsider this. You don't have to set it now, but we'll just figure out a date that where we expect the agenda to be relatively light, so you have time to to hear comments, and then we would send letters to all the affected property owners notifying them that on such and such date that the village board will be considering these address changes, and if they have comments they want to submit ahead of time or be at the meeting, then they can do that.
Trustee Malo?
My only other comment, I'm in favor of this, is again, when you mentioned, about the zip code, if that were to change, I would definitely want to do this, absolutely, because we're all going to be changing our address, so that would be a no-brainer to me. But does it make sense to try to, we don't know when our response will come, and it's already delayed. I'm cautiously optimistic it's good that they're spending their time reviewing that. Would you want to wait for that, or should we look into this issue on its own anyway?
Well, it's, the first horse is already out of the gate, so maybe a good idea to at least, again, look into it further.
Makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, if you start into this process right now, let's say we schedule the further discussion at a June board meeting, just thinking we need several weeks, to notify people. Have a discussion then, and maybe, we'll just keep waiting to see if we hear on the zip code, but at least that'll start the process, and hopefully the things will come together. Two issues.
Actually, knowing that we will have resistance, I'd like to hold off till we get an answer back on the zip code. Then we can incorporate the whole thing when we talk about the meeting. So before, he starts sending out letters and, doing anything else on the project, I'd like to wait till we find out what the answer is gonna be on our zip code. Because I know a lot of the businesses want the Burr Ridge zip code rather than Willowbrook.
Well, again, we're not talking about sending out letters or anything prematurely. We're talking about doing a little more research on it first? Is that what you're thinking about, or?
Well, whatever you want me to do. My suggestion was to go ahead and send letters out, but if you want to just give it some more time and have me check with update this list, check with the post office. I've already made some calls to DUCOM, our 911 service provider, and come back with a little bit more definitive information on those issues. I'd be glad to do that. And that'll buy a little time to see if we get information on the zip code.
The question, the reason I asked that question is, if the question really is, do we want more information and seriously go down this path with or without the zip code? And the zip code's already, that horse is already out of the gate. We've had, it's in appeal already, so we at least get a little head start on this to be able to answer both questions closer to the same time. So I would recommend to at least go to that next level now, and hopefully we'll get good news from the post service. If not, we have to fly out and pick at the place.
That makes sense to me, Mayor. I agree with Trustee Paveza that it would be nice to have that, but I think by June, hopefully, I would think we'll have the response by then, and I feel that we should discuss this regardless of whether we get the zip code or not. It would be nice to know, and hopefully by that time we will have that answer and can incorporate that.
When you say discuss it, what are we gonna discuss?
The results of the questions we're going to get from the businesses in the village and also from residents. It's not just up to us, of course.
Like I said, if it's only a month or two, I'd like to wait till we get the answer on the zip code. Because I know the businesses are gonna come back because they were number one on the chart against it when we brought it up in '04.
So is what you're thinking, just to clarify, that assuming we had good news and we said, hey, listen, we're going to change your addresses anyway, would you also consider changing it, changing your zip code already? As long as we're going to do that, would you also consider this? Would you think that would be an easier thing to project, or what are you?
Well, I think it's something to go back to them with that, we want to bring up into the We want to bring into the 21st century our address system. We've got a new zip code. Now we'd like to go with a new address system, and we think that's the proper way to go. I mean, if they turn us down, well, we got to try it without doing it that way. But, you know, if it's only a month or two till we get an answer, I'd rather wait.
Any other thoughts or sentiment? Snyder?
I feel that after trustee Model said that we're gonna probably know by June. So, what trustee Gervais said, my feeling is to go ahead, get it ready. Whether or not, if we're turned down, we wanna make the change anyway and correct everything. So to wait and then restart, having staff do it twice the job, go through, get the address, send the letters out, have the discussion. If we're lucky enough to get blessed with a new zip code, great. If not, we're already ready and we're done on the agenda.
Yeah, I thought, yeah, is it 21st century? I think it's getting up to the 20th century for addresses, okay, Doug, does this require a official vote or motion or request, or what do you?
No, is the consensus to go ahead and set a date and notify affected property owners of a date certain for discussion, maybe in June sometime, or to just come back and report to the board without doing that step?
Okay.
Which one?
Consensus, how would you used to give two options, I got lost on the second one. What the motion would be,
I mean, I think it's clear.
consensus would be.
It's clear that you want to consider this.
Correct. It seems like it's.
So the question I have is, do you want me to report back to you with more information about, update this list, get a definitive response from the post office, from DUCOM, and report back to you, and then, or do you want me to go do that and go ahead and notify the affected property owners of a date certain when you're going to talk about this?
It sounds like that would be a good compromise, somewhere in between what Trustee Bethesda wanted and what, going full tilt with mailing all the residents. So I would elect for the first option to get more definitive information from the post office and DUCOM, et cetera, first before we do it, and then hold off on the letters until later. Yes?
Doug, 2004, the mail service was already okay with it, correct? What do you think would be different today versus 2004?
I don't think anything will be different.
DUCOM, do you think it would be any different today than it would 2004?
No.
Okay, is there anything that's gonna be different today than 2004?
There is one thing. We have a Willowbrook Burr Ridge postal annex where our mail comes through. Previously, it came through LaGrange or it came through Hinsdale or Oak Brook. So that's different.
Good points, though.
Well, I think I would like to get the word
Take the
out,
first step.
take it one step at a time, and, because the last thing we want to do is to notify people that we're making this change and then
Or
have to
to-
do it all
or-
over again with the zip code.
Or to leave the impression that we are,
Yeah.
going to do it, so it's not a done deal yet. But, okay, I would ask you to, would consensus on the board to, yes?
Put something on the website that we're
Yes.
considering doing, let everyone start doing it this way while you're doing your due diligence?
It's to simplify and then for safety reasons, that's, and getting up to the 20th or 21st century with addresses, it sounds a little ancient, but you're right, it was State Street, wasn't it? It is State Street for how many?
In Madison.
Yeah. I wasn't born here, so I did learn that a while ago. I forgot it was actually State Street, though. Thanks. Trustee Schiappa?
I want to know, how long have we been working on the zip code? I mean, do we want to set it like
It's been about 3 months.
Yeah, so there, we filed an appeal. We were initially denied and we filed an appeal. And it was my understanding that they should have responded by now. So again, I'm taking it as a cautiously optimistic thing that this is taking so long, that they are doing a thorough review. So, I think it's likely, but it would be anyone's guess that you're going to definitely have a response by June, but, who knows?
And we even went right to the Postmaster General, hopefully.
Okay.
Making an appeal through other people that we know that know her. So that might be.
More information by June.
Yeah, I don't think they're going to respond to us until they say yes or no. Again, is my understanding of the process. At this point, it's in their hand. We're either going to get a yes or a no, but
Yeah, but to your point,
who knows?
cautiously optimistic, it's taking a while. At least they're considering it. We need to get the door slammed right away.
Exactly. I'm taking it as a cautiously
And
optimistic.
we might check with the legislators one more time.
I will follow up with our representatives.
Okay. Do you need official vote or anything? Or you pretty much
No,
agree
I
that's?
think we're good.
You okay with that? Trustees?
I'm okay with the compromise approach. I hate to alert these businesses and get them excited, and the residents get them excited, then have to go through this whole process a second time if and when we do get our own zip code. So
Yeah, that's crawl, walk, run.
I think this is a good compromise.
Okay. Okay, on to the next topic. Consideration of policy regarding balanced budgets, or the terminology of balanced budgets, and a clarification for the residents, everyone else, to how this is being discussed and handled.
As first, we were asked, Trustee Model asked us to put something on the agenda. We currently have a policy regarding fund balance, and I'm suggesting that we consider expanding that policy. Staff drafted an expanded policy, budget policy, and it's based on past practice of the village and the village board, and what we consider to be a prudent policy. And I'd like Jerry Sapp, our finance director, just to quickly overview that draft policy.
Yes, as Trustee Model had asked us to be on the agenda and suggesting that we adopt a policy defining and requiring a balanced budget. And the policy that staff is suggesting is, and I'll just kind of get it up here. Good. I'll just briefly go through it. In order to maintain village services and operation in a prudent and fiscally responsible manner and present for the future, it is the policy of the Village of Burr Ridge to maintain a balanced budget, and defined as these 3 points. An unreserved fund balance level in the general fund should be a minimum of 20%. We currently have a 10 to 20% minimum, so that's going to be put up to a 20%. Total budget expenditures in the general fund should not exceed total anticipated revenues in any given fiscal year, and then total expenditures in all funds should not exceed total anticipated revenues in any fiscal year plus any unreserved funds over and above the 20% minimum in the general fund balance. Just as a background, our current unreserved fund in the general fund is at approximately 62, far above the 20% of one-time expenditures. This is comparing our $5.5 million reserve to our $8.8 million in expenditures. And as I mentioned before, our current policy ranges from 10 to 20% in one-year expenditures.
Thank you, Jerry. I did want to quickly go over a few additional items related to this issue. First, I want to say, there's been a lot of discussion recently, and I think very healthy discussion for the village in establishing and understanding our budget process, and establishing a policy, I think, is a very good and beneficial thing to do for the village board and for administration. Let me just summarize by first stating that we will have a balanced budget in fiscal year 18-19 after we draw down on reserves. Our reserve funds have increased in the last few years, and our current budget is in very good financial condition. It's really, we use fund accounting in Burr Ridge, as do most village governments. And so we essentially have 12 different budgets. The general fund, it covers all day-to-day operating expenses. So everything, salaries, benefits, printing paper, everything we need, electric bill is all paid out of the general fund, and that's our operating expenses. The general fund has been balanced every year, except for 1 year during the recession, 2008. We had to dip into some reserves in the general fund because revenues had fallen far short of expectations. But again, the general fund, otherwise it's always been balanced, usually has an excess that's transferred into some of the other funds for capital projects and other similar purposes. In the fiscal year 18-19 budget, the reserves, ending reserves are $25,000 more than what we started with. It's anticipated to be $25,000 more than what we started with on May 1st, 2018. That's after a $215,000 transfer to the road program to fund the capital projects fund. The other funds include special revenue funds, motel fuel tax fund, which is just a pass-through fund. We get tax dollars from the state. We put it in the motor fuel tax fund and transfer it out to the capital projects fund. The hotel motel tax is a restricted fund that can only be used for certain expenses. And you can see there's an excess of funds in our reserves are building up in the hotel motel tax fund. In the, going back to the motor fuel tax fund, you do see we took out $7,000, so that's technically, dipping into the reserves of that fund. Although, again, that's just a pass-through. We try to keep $25,000 in there minimum for accounting purposes, so that if bills come due before money comes in, we've always got a little bit there to make sure that that fund's always in a positive situation. Capital projects funds, we've talked about the capital improvements fund, i.e. the road program, and you can see that even after the $215,000 transfer from the general fund, we're still taking $20,000 out of reserves to fully fund the capital improvements fund. In 18-19, we end up with ending reserves of $274. The village board has talked about the capital improvements fund and the need to find a second dedicated revenue source for the capital improvements fund, and we'll have that conversation with the village board this summer or fall sometime. The sidewalks pathway funds, again, we've talked about that's a fund to pay for new sidewalks, and that is showing we're dipping into reserves, as we often do in that fund. We transfer money from developer donations and from grants into that fund, and then we spend it for new sidewalks. The equipment replacement fund is the biggest source of reserve funding in this year's budget. Public Works bought some new equipment. It's the nature of this fund that every few years you're going to need a new dump truck, or you're going to need something that costs a lot of money, and so you spend more that year than you put into it. But as you can see, we still end up with a reserve of over $400,000 in that fund, and that'll get built up again in the next few years, and will likely be shown in the black in the next few years for that year. But again, we have to, it's the nature of it, what I call a savings account fund, where you put savings into it every year, and then some years you're going to spend more than you put in, and that's just the responsible way to budget these funds. Same with the stormwater fund. We had a one-time emergency where storm sewer collapsed on County Line Road, so that's being spent out of this 18-19 budget. So you see a big deficit that year. Future years, you'll see that where we actually increase the reserves. Debt service fund is self-sustaining. That's our police station debt. which comes due in 2022. Then we have our enterprise funds. We talked about that at a recent board meeting. With the new rates, we expect to see the reserves start to climb back up to a healthy 4 or 5% of our capital, value of our capital in those funds. The internal service funds, the information technology fund, there's some, again, it's another one of a savings account fund where we put money in, and then every once in a while we take more out than we put in for that given year because we've got equipment to purchase. That's what's happening there. And then finally, you have the police pension fund, which we've talked about before, and that grows every year. I think the policy that we were asked to address and the draft policy that we've come up with and proposed that Jerry and I worked on, I think makes a lot of sense. It acknowledges that our general fund will always be balanced every year. You know, the current year revenues will always equal to or exceed the current year expenditures. We will always keep 20% minimum balance in the general reserve, our general fund. And the other funds, we will be able to spend reserves as we always do in a prudent, responsible way, where we're not affecting our fund balance, not affecting the general fund, but we're saving money and then we're spending it as we see fit. So I think this is a policy that makes sense. It's consistent with general accounting principles, and I think it's consistent with responsible budgeting for the village of Burr Ridge. I'd be happy to answer your questions.
Trustee Model?
Jerry.
So thank you very much, Doug and Jerry, for taking the time to look into this, and thank you all for taking the time to consider it. You know, I think, to me, I understand the budgets very well. We went through them in the budget workshop. I think the village is very responsible, does have a responsible budget, a budget that many villages in Illinois or in any state would be envious of, and I think we set a great example here. But to me, it's about semantics and painting the village in the best light. And you know, I think these, like you just went through, these are responsibly run funds. And you know, we've had some discussions. There's a lot of different definitions of a balanced budget. Illinois is like 45 states in this country that has, by law, in the Constitution, a requirement for a balanced budget. And I was troubled as I left the last meeting thinking, well, how come Illinois gets to call their budget balanced, as reckless and irresponsible as they are, when Burr Ridge, you know, according to some of the definitions I'd heard before, wasn't balanced? And I didn't think that's correct. So I like this policy. I think it sets the tone for what Burr Ridge is. It's a well-run, responsible town, and I think it allows us all to agree on terminology, on semantics, because really there is no right answer. There's a lot of different definitions. The state constitution has one, the U.S. Constitution has one, the dictionary has one, business books have one. We could argue all day long, but let's set a policy that we agree on that paints the village in the best light.
And not only paints it in the best light, but tells the correct story.
The correct story, exactly. I think anyone who were to call our fund irresponsible, unbalanced, you're not understanding the facts. And when you look at the facts as we just did, the numbers make a lot of sense right now. It is a well-run town, a well-run budget, and I would like to be able to call it that, and we all agree on that.
Trustee Snyder?
Well, I appreciate that Doug got up and stated that we will have a balanced budget by drawing down on our reserves, which we put away for a rainy day. That's why we have excess of the 20%, which is Trustee Miles going to take it from 10 to 20 to 20, which I'm very comfortable with. But at the end of the day, you have the reserves for a reason. But I like the fact that you made a statement, Doug, that we're drawing down to be balanced rather than to say we're a balanced budget, but we're not. X's and O's aren't working, but by pulling down the reserves, we are. So thank you for that.
Trustee Cappa?
So, and I did vote for the budget because I do believe it's a balanced budget. If you look at our general fund, I believe that Burr Ridge provides service to its residents and businesses, and that is providing security through our police force, that is providing maintenance of our streets, and that's public works, and then our administration. When you want to build a house, it's not just digging a hole in the ground. You've got to apply for permits, and we've got to review plans. So our general fund pays our natural expenses. It's the capital projects, equipment, and replacing actual roads that are the big funds that are affecting our budget. So those are things that we have to watch for over the coming years, not just this year, next year, the next 5 years, 10 years, of how are we going to fund those big capital projects. And that's something that I'm going to keep my eye on as well. And I don't know has there been a reserve study done for the village? Meaning, are we keeping up? Is that reserve going to keep up with inflation over the next 10 years? You know, if we keep pulling out of reserves and it's only making so much and we keep pulling out of it, are we?
Go ahead.
The general fund stays pretty stagnant,
Okay.
steady on that, and balanced budget. And we've been transferring as much as we can over to the equipment replacement fund, over to the road program, to be able to pay for that in the future.
Right.
Where we ran into, where we had to kind of beef up a fund is the water fund this year, where we did a rate structure, because if you looked at that fund over the
Yes.
years, it was
Right.
going down. So
Right.
that's one of the areas that we addressed this year with more of a rate study.
Trustee Snyder?
But I think you brought up the last 4 or 5 years, your reserves went up in the general fund. Only 1 year did you go down. So going back to your statement of watching their funds and how it's going, I think the village has done staff
Yes.
has done a very good job.
Yes, and I want to make sure that we keep an eye on it. I mean, that's what we're supposed to be doing.
Trustee Paveza?
One of the reasons the reserves are where they are is we work on a tight, balanced budget. And we try to fund everything we can see. But there are things that affect our budget that so far, because we do try to anticipate the negative parts, the parts that all of a sudden come up and provides an excess is, say we have a very warm, dry winter, so save a lot of money there. If we lose a policeman somewhere, you don't just hire him right away, so there's quite a bit of money in the reserve. Things happen one way or the other, but as you notice, our reserves are there, and I know for all the years we used to argue with Steve. Steve liked the big reserves because it's invested and we get a nice return on the money there, so he liked to keep the reserves up. But we do watch it, and with the very few times that we have to pull money out of our reserves, more than likely, like the last 4 budgets, there was a slight excess. And so every one of the last 4 budgets, we actually put money into our reserves.
Trustee Model?
So I agree with what Trustee Paveza just said about, the reserves fluctuate, the unexpected things, both favorable and unfavorable, happen. And in general, again, we run it very responsibly. Also with what Trustee Chiappa said, I think we're all cognizant, I certainly am, and totally agree with you how important it is for us to be watching this, planning prudently. And I think that in the past, the trustees have been. That's how we got to this point. But I know all of us are concerned about the future, and times are changing, and towns are looking for, different ways to collect revenue and balance their budget and do things right. Again, I think we're one of the best examples in the area of a well-run town. And I know we're all considering ways to broaden the tax base and look at ways to keep having those healthy reserves and those healthy funds in the future, fund the pathway fund, the road fund. So I know we've all had some discussions. There's a lot of ideas being talked about in the community and a lot of exciting things that could come together. So I know we'll keep doing that responsible thing, but I would like us all to hopefully be able to pass this policy and agree that Burridge is fiscally well-run, prudent, and does have a balanced budget.
Well, on that note, I just want to like to add in that to a point, it almost doesn't matter what we define as a balanced budget. What really matters is what the perception is and what the common accounting principles accept as a balanced budget. And what's interesting is that I know this was probably all started from when my opponent accused us or me of having unbalanced budgets. Well, that would mean that every previous board except for one was lying. That would mean that every previous mayor was as well, and it would reflect badly on village administrator, the finance director, But in politics, it doesn't really matter what's true, it matters what's convincing, I found out. But it does beg the question, though, why the answer isn't quite so simple. How when expenses exceed reserves, someone could point and say, hey, you have an unbalanced budget and you're a bad village. Why is the answer not quite that simple when it comes to fund accounting? I'd like to ask the finance director that question.
Fund accounting is quite a bit different than private sector accounting. In private sector accounting, they look to, always have your revenues more than your expenditures, making profit, investing it in the business. In governmental fund accounting standards, they really consider the fund as a separate operating entity, each standing on its own, with the major operating fund being the general fund. And that's why we balance that budget as a matter of practice every year. Everything else, you have to have ample reserves in order to manage those funds. You have to have enough MFT money. You have to have enough hotel motel tax money. So fund accounting is quite a bit different and viewed a little bit different in government entities.
It reminds me of my days in the insurance business, where we had funds in the reinsurance business. We had funds set aside for claims that were occurred but not we think were occurred, but not reported yet. And you had to put the money in different funds to make sure everything was correct. So, yeah, well, thank you for that description. Is there any other questions of the trustee, Francis?
Yes. I support this policy. I think it's clear and concise. We can all agree on it. But I have some questions of staff. Could you go back to the previous slides, Doug? With the 12 different fund accounts there. Could you scroll to the bottom, please? What is our beginning reserves, the total beginning reserves of the village?
Combined of
Yeah.
all the different funds?
Yeah.
We'd have to add those up. I don't have that number in front of me.
Okay, I'd like to see those added up.
Okay.
And also
I'm sorry.
estimated revenues, all those added up. Estimated available, all that added up. Budget expenditures and reserves increase and decrease. Especially reserves increase and decrease, and ending reserves, because this year, in our budget, we're forecasting a $350,970 decrease in our reserves. Okay? So we're dipping into our piggy bank, $350,000. And I understand about fund accounting, okay? I understand that. And the general fund and the restricted funds, the non-restricted funds, okay? But the bottom line is we're dipping into our piggy bank, $350,000. And I go back to the proposed budget for 2016, 2017, which I pulled the same summary, I pulled the summary page from. And that budget, we were dipping into our piggy bank $358,000. Okay, now, Steve always did his magic and was able to bring that number way down, okay? But it's a budget. It's our best crystal ball, our best thinking cap that we put on, that staff puts on, to forecast what we're going to spend and what we're going to take in for that coming year. And the village staff does a great job of it, but sometimes you can't predict the weather. You can't predict when water main's going to break. You can't predict when the sewer's going to collapse, and so forth. So we're fortunate to have a healthy reserve. Okay, but we're fortunate to be able to draw on that reserve when we're forecasting $970 to decrease that reserve. So as long as we can agree that we're taking in a certain amount of revenue, spending a certain amount of revenue, and balancing our budget with the reserves, I'm okay with that.
Trustee Model?
Yeah, so
Sorry, anything else, Trustee Francis? Anything else?
Not at this time, no.
I appreciate that comment and agree with you. You know, we have been, and I think it's important to point out, though, that this is the budget, and like you mentioned, that oftentimes the actual comes in far more favorable than the budget. We could project a much more aggressive budget that projects a budget surplus and leaves the staff with a heck of a job to do to meet that thing, and by the end of the year, we'd end up negative. But I think, again, the point is that the village has been run very prudently, very conservatively. We project a very conservative budget, and in the end, it actually works out better. And so hopefully that'll happen, but like you said, you don't know what the sewer main's gonna break, we don't know what's gonna go wrong, but like we said, we've got a nice definition here that hopefully we can all agree on that does allow us to tap in the piggy bank when we need it and be cognizant of revenues for the future and where we're gonna go, so we keep that piggy bank healthy. It's there for us when we need it, and it is at 62% of one-year revenue, so that's a pretty healthy piggy bank compared to most villages. But that was my comment, that the budget is not always what it turns out to be in reality by the end.
And Jerry, may I ask you, you threw out a number the other day of $33 million of reserves. What did that include?
That's, if you stack all the funds together, all the separate budgets, all the separate revenues, all the separate expenditures, it's actually on page, section 3, page 1 of the budget that shows that we have 33 million in reserves, that we're anticipating 19 million in revenues, estimated revenues. So available village-wide is 52 million to pay for the $19.4 million expenditures overall fund budgets. And then that's, you know, to Guy's point, that's where we show on that page where we draw down the 350,000 on our reserves.
Gotcha. Okay, thank you. Anyone else?
I support trustee Miles' policy. I agree with Guy with the standpoint of the drawing down. I want to make sure I understood what you said. We're 350 or 327 short, and you're making note, just like we brought up in the beginning, that we're going to balance it by drawing down on our reserves.
Correct.
And we're going to watch it continue and be prudent from there.
Municipal fund accounting.
Right. Okay, then I'm fine.
Okay. Okay, thank you. Looks like we have a resident that'd like to make a comment.
Alice Crampett, 7515 Drew. I just have I'll start with the question. Is it standard practice for other villages to spell out those 3 points like that? I'm not sure that. I mean, what is the standard for other villages? Do they take it to that level? Jerry, do you know that kind of thing?
Okay, actually, wait, Jerry, let me ask you.
Okay.
I'm gonna have you make your 3 points, but
Oh, okay,
once
all right.
one time they'll have. Then we'll,
One answer, okay. So I'd just like to say this. As a resident, I want a clear picture of the health of our village. I do want to know whether income meets expenses. And if we're not having that situation, are we using money from other funds or assets to make our budget appear balanced? I don't like the way you said that we're painting a pretty picture of what's best for our village. I think that makes it almost sound like we're covering something up. But it is important to me as a resident to have these budget discussions. And if we're using assets to balance our budget, are we going to have to cut services down the road? Those are all things that I agree we need to look at. But I also worry that if you paint this, you know, good picture of the village when we really do have a bit of a deficit here and there, what are the residents going to think? If we had to come back to the residents and ask for, let's say, a tax increase or something, if you cover this up and make it look so good, then the public is not going to have a good understanding and may not support why increases may be needed in the future. So I just worry about that painted picture. So to me, I kind of, you know, I'm okay with this. I think that the transparency is important. But I think it's more important that our board focuses on the ways to increase revenue rather than play this semantics game, because this has never really been an issue before until this election season. So let's not, you know, cover anything up. Let's make sure that the residents understand what's going on and just tell it as it is. There's no need to paint a pretty picture. Be transparent and not play a semantics game. Thank you.
As I mentioned before, the emphasis is on the fund. So, I mean, this is common to list out funds like this. What you're really required to do as far as a budget is to file an ordinance and then certify with the county that you have enough estimated and available reserves to pay for that budget. balancing a budget is kind of a best practice, especially when it comes to the general fund, because it really shows the public that you are living within your means. And displaying the other funds like that shows that you are using those funds for the legal intended purposes. So the second point, I believe, was as far as the process and the painting the picture. I've sat through 22 budgets, and it's, and we start in December and we end in March. And with the administrator, we go through the revenues in all funds probably about 3 times. We keep multi-year trend analysis, so we have a pretty good handle on what our revenue stream is and what's coming into the village. On the expenditure side, each department comes in and sits with the administrator during the budget hearing and goes through each line item. No one just submits a total budget. You look at each line item and what is made up of that line item. Is that what you need? Do you need more or less? So, our budgeting process here at the village has always been very, very strong and something that we've always been kind of proud of. So,
Thank you.
Well, the point
Trustee Pavesa?
that the resident made, and I would say the use of words, we don't, am I right, Drew? We don't plan on making our budget look good by taking money out of our reserves. Sometimes we have reserves, excess that goes into our reserves. If we did this all the time to make our budget look good, we wouldn't have the reserves that we have right now. I mean, we do our best to be there. Sometimes we do have to take it out, but it's not meant to look good. It's meant to do what was right for the village that year. Right?
yes, correct.
Okay.
Trustee Mao?
Looking for a motion, Paul? Or
Any other comments regarding the comments or?
Well, I think the resident asked if other villages do it like this, and I want to say that have this policy.
I would say that I'm not sure if other villages, actually, villages have this in-depth of a policy. I know most villages have a fund balance policy, which is typically closer to 5 or 10%.
Right.
We're double that, at least double that at 20% as our policy. The actual fund balance is much larger. But I think this policy is consistent with the way any village, any responsible village manages their budget.
I can respond to that also. In doing some research in proposing this, again, I mentioned 45 states have a balanced budget requirement, and their definition is typically that expenditures don't exceed available revenues. Available meaning they could come out of reserves, they could come out of whatever. So the U.S. Senate has a different definition. So my understanding is that different governmental bodies that want to call their budget balanced or unbalanced set a policy and stick to that policy, and that's how they define their budget. And again, to me, this is certainly no intention to not be completely transparent. I'm very in favor of the transparency of the facts, of the information. Our staff does a great job with the budget. Nothing's really going to change in that. It's just that we're setting a policy, a guideline for us all to operate by, which is what the governmental bodies that I looked into did. They set a policy.
Makes sense. And again, fund accounting is different than, yes, Trustee Francis?
So in the spirit of transparency, can we go back to the previous slide? On future budgets, we're going to restore that total line along the bottom.
If you want to.
In the spirit of transparency, we're going to do that?
Well, there were several reasons that we removed that. One is when you add up estimated revenue, you put a total at the bottom, it's misleading. Because, for example, it shows $8.8 million of estimated revenue in the general fund. Well, there was $215,000 taken out of that and put into as revenue in the capital improvements fund.
Okay, so that'll balance in the capital improvements fund then.
Well, though, it's going to show $430,000 of total revenue, even though it's really only $215,000 of revenue. So when you put that number at the bottom, it becomes misleading because it's really not dollar bills coming into the village.
Oh, I understand that, and you had a way for accounting for those transfers previously also, from one fund to another, so that it wasn't double counting.
Well, in this table, I think it was, wasn't it? Yeah, in this table, that's why I'm saying when you just add up those numbers and put them at the bottom, it's,
Okay.
I found that to be misleading.
Oh, all right. So, but when I add up the reserve increase or decrease number, and it comes out to $350,970, that's the same number that's shown on page 1. On the summary budget that shows revenues and
Shows
expenditures.
up elsewhere in the budget, right, correct.
So, I think
Just
I
remind-
think you should total these up.
That's fine, it's your budget, and if that's what, I'm glad. you
And,
did.
but this is all, this way it's always been done? Pretty
No,
much?
we, we took that bottom line out
This year.
this year.
At
And
the
we
second
added in
revision.
the column estimated available, because for two reasons. One is we felt that was the direction the board gave us at your first workshop back in February. And not that specifically, but your direction was to show the budget more accurately in terms of whether it's a balanced budget. And using, this, what I understand is a balanced budget, that's what we did. I'm glad to put that total line back in there. It's in there elsewhere in the budget document.
It's
This
on
year's budget is done, but we're gonna get another
section-
crack at this, sorry.
the total amount is in section 3, page 2. So it's the same numbers
Right.
for estimated revenue for the 18-19 budget, and it comes to $19,065,520. And that's the total for estimated revenue, with the same numbers.
Yep.
And even with
Section
that,
3, page 2.
even with that number out, everything else is the way it's been done for 20, 30 years. So it would be, nothing has been done unusual or make it look good or, it's a,
I'm just asking to have it restored, this sheet restored the way it was in previous years on the next year's budget. And if we have trouble accounting for the transfers, put another column in for transfers.
it's just another reason why I didn't go into accounting. I don't know if politics was the right decision either, but, trustee Model?
Can I make a motion? Sure. To approve the policy as drafted?
And which is,
The policy regarding balanced budgets?
and also, this is also in keeping with state rules, actually more conservative than state rules and descriptions.
Right, we
All
took,
state parameters. Do I have a second?
Second.
Any discussion? Trustee Francis?
I personally would not want to hang my hat on state rules. They were drafted by our legislators who can't even draft a budget, let alone draft a balanced budget, who can't pay their bills and are in a budget impasse, as we all know. So I take exception to the state portion of it, but thanh you.
Well, we have to listen to the state, and we have to listen to
We have to listen, we don't have to agree.
We even have to listen in their court when they make decisions.
Pardon?
Even when our own Supreme Court makes a decision, we may not agree with it, but it's we have to follow it.
So there's policy from the state that dictates we have to follow their budget definitions?
No,
Okay.
I think what's being referred to is not legislation, it's the Illinois Constitution.
Right.
Well, that covers their budgets, not ours.
Right, correct.
Any other discussion? Motion is second. Roll call, please.
Trustee Model,
yes?
trustee Snyder,
Yes.
trustee Skiappa,
Yes.
trustee Francis.
Yes.
Trustee Pavilion,
Yes.
5-0.
On to a more fun subject.
I also like what trustee Francis says, add that bottom line in the deficit, the one additional line that you stated. What was the statement?
The total, the total on
The
that
total was
page.
there, but not the total, there was one additional, transfer.
Transfer.
So you made the transfer for next year?
So we don't double count transfers if
we
we
can
want to
do
add a
that.
column.
I think that's very good.
Yeah.
That'll be beneficial. Thank you.
Thanks.
We're almost to the bicycle, that'd be more fun. But
Thought we were gonna
meantime.
cycle right through.
8C, review of 2017-19 strategic goals, update for the first quarter.
Thank you.
Changing gears.
You received a report from staff, the first quarter report on the strategic goals. I'd be glad to go through these in any way you'd like. Typically, in the past, we just would have this actually on the consent agenda, but since this was the first time, I wanted to bring some attention to it. If there's an item on here you'd like me to talk about or address specifically, I'm glad to do that, but otherwise, this is just for your review and for your information.
Because you don't want to do any highlights or?
Well, I think there's, just in summary, there's a lot of good stuff going on here. If anyone hasn't had time to look into every one, I would encourage you to do so. In communication strategies, we've added the chat function to our website. That's still kind of in development, but we're happy with how that's going so far. We will be coming back to you in the near future with overall communication policy and discussion on all different social media and newsletters and different ways we communicate. Under community events, the events committee has met and has looked at some of these goals related to community events. Several of the items relate to economic development, and Evan Walter's been leading the charge with our economic development committee, and I'm very pleased with the progress so far, and I anticipate a lot more progress in that arena in the coming months and over the course of the remainder of the year. We have been in contact with IDOT about a downtown Burr Ridge sticker or sign on I-55. And that's pending. Hopefully that will come through. We've identified a few cost savings, and those are listed, and we will continue to do that. That's ongoing, and we'll always be looking for ways to continue to identify cost savings. Onboarding, we look for training opportunities. We've also increased the training budget for boards and commissions so that trustees and plan commissioners and other committees of the village will have funds available if opportunities come up for training. We mentioned the zip code, and we're hopefully soon we'll get an answer, hopefully a positive answer on getting our own zip code. Under diversify village revenues, we've received some grants. Applications have been submitted, and we're also going to be presenting an overview of the funding options for the road program later this year. That also relates a little bit to economic development and some of the work that Evan and the Economic Development Commission will be doing in the near future, looking for businesses and other opportunities to attract revenue to the village. Department reviews, we've reorganized our code compliance program, and that's coming on board in May. And I just had a conversation with Evan about that today, and we're very pleased with the progress there. That will continue with other departments as we move forward. Under improved property values, the local school committee has been formed, and they are looking at ideas on how we can help improve and add to the quality of local schools and what the village can do in that role. Performance metrics, we'll use a pilot program in code compliance, and then hopefully as that goes is successful, we'll be able to transfer that to some other departments. The fiscal year 18-19 budget includes $20,000 for a comprehensive plan amendment to be focused on housing evaluation to meet the goal of evaluating housing in the village. Before any money is spent there, we'll come back to you with a proposal, and you'll have the opportunity to decide whether to move forward with that. We're continuing to look at zoning amendments and other ways to achieve full commercial occupancy in our business parks. The Stormwater Committee is meeting and discussing seed money to fund homeowners associations with maintenance of stormwater infrastructure. We'll certainly report to the Stormwater Committee on other opportunities to improve the stormwater facilities in the village. We'll be discussing sidewalks in the future road programming discussion and funding for the road program as sidewalks are the other capital projects that needs help with additional revenues. The video surveillance network has been expanded. We've talked to the Village Center about incorporating the Village Center. Currently are developing a location analysis for placement of cameras in public areas. As you know, it so far has been limited to subdivision entryways, but we hope to expand that and see that grow to be village-wide eventually. Assessing the TCF property, we have made contact with TCF and a potential retail developer. That developer's analyzing the property, see if it's of any interest to them. If it is, we'll try to coordinate contact with TCF. We've talked to TCF Bank, the property owner, and they're interested, and we'll, as that moves forward, we'll report back to the board. In terms of business survey and service needs, that's in process with the Economic Development Committee. Dave Preissig has talked to IDOT and the Illinois Tollway and about a pedestrian bridge over I-55. We hope to have more information on that in the near future. And then finally, under intergovernmental cooperation, we continue to look for opportunities to work with our neighbors to come up with new and better ways, more efficient ways to provide services, and we'll continue to do so.
Good.
Happy to answer any questions about any of those goals.
Any questions? Thanks, Doug. And moving on to 8D, consideration of recommendation to create a bicycle committee. Who do you want to have
I believe Trustee Schiappa had asked that this be on the agenda, so
Yes.
would you like to take it?
So I was approached by a resident about increasing the awareness of bicycling in Burr Ridge and promoting the safety of bicycling in Burr Ridge. And we had a great discussion, and I met with Louisa Hock and Elaine Layden, who are also on the Pathway Commission, and Louisa's on the Planning Commission as well. And so I thought it'd be they came to me with a whole host of ideas of how to meet those two goals in Burr Ridge. And so I had asked the village if we can just start a committee so that we can start implementing these ideas in Burr Ridge to promote the awareness of bicycling and maintain safety in bicycling. And Louise is here, and I think she wanted to get up and say a couple of words. Mayor?
Sure.
Hello. We are very excited about the possibility of forming a bicycle committee or subcommittee. I'm here with Elaine Layden and Paul Castelli, both avid cyclists like myself. With the weather getting warmer, more residents will choose to get on a bicycle. And by forming these committees, or this committee, it will increase the awareness, remind residents what the rules are, also cyclists. We're very thankful that Trustee Schiappa has recommended or is requesting that May be National Bicycle Month. With that, it'll help the village showcase all the benefits of cycling for the village, and also hopefully encourage others to get on their bike, ride to the downtown, ride to school, ride to the parks, just increase the numbers and the safety with that and the visibility. Thank you, for considering it.
So with that, we're looking to, I'm looking to my fellow trustees if we could create a bicycle committee, either a standalone committee or a subcommittee of maybe Pathway. So I wanted to hear back from.
I'm sorry, and what?
A subcommittee of the Pathway Commission or a standalone committee by itself.
What would the preference be?
Probably a standalone.
From a staff perspective, is it easier for a standalone or a subcommittee, or it's the same work?
Same work, yeah, same thing.
And what would the possible outcome be of this, as far as village involvement, expense, staff, education? What could that mean, or what does that mean? Trustee Schiappa?
An idea of what the outcome of this would be?
You know, they promote, I mean, it sounds like it's certainly a noble cause and something that we, you know, I grew up on riding these things, and I think it's a great idea from a safety standpoint and awareness. What would be what could be the outcome of?
Okay, so it's right away, immediately, what we're looking to do is create a map of great bike routes throughout Burr Ridge. One of the unique characteristics of Burr Ridge is that we sit between two counties. So a lot of the bike maps that are out there are either focused on the DuPage side or on the Cook side. So we'll have one comprehensive map showing trail maps of good bicycle routes. On the other side would be some rules and good biking habits, you know, to remind bikers and riders of how to be a good, respectful rider around town. We'd eventually, like to enlist the police department in helping to promote bicycling as well. So there are.
Would it include any type of mailings, or just maybe something online?
Well, considering May is
printing?
We're declaring May the Bicycle Month, so we'll be in the e-briefs for each week in May with some tips for bicycling. Also included in the map, we'll have areas where bike racks will be located around town as well. And we'll see, probably we'd like to get, eventually we'd like to maybe put signs up of where good trails are, you're following a good bike route. I'd like to work with the Streets Committee as well on some of the streets that we are repaving. Is there a possibility of adding a bike lane in some of those streets to make it safer for both cars and bikes to travel through? So those are just a couple of the examples that we'd like to increase awareness and then keep the safety of bicycling in Burr Ridge.
That's always an interesting topic, because I thought when Madison Street was widened 5-10 years ago, they put the lane only on one side, but only for a few blocks. I thought it would have been a good idea to do it then, but then if it's not used regularly, gravel ends up accumulating, and the bikers don't ride there anyway because of the danger of driving over rocks and things. So it's like a catch-22. But certainly it's the wave of the future with, downtown Chicago, downtown Madison, and people are on bikes all the time. I even saw somebody in December in the middle of a snowstorm going across the bridge with these big balloon tires. Fat tires. Fat tires. Yep.
Yeah, fat tires.
With our committee, what we're
I know what they're called.
Our committee, that's what we're hoping to do, is increase that awareness, and hopefully we'll get more people on their bikes around town.
And is it? Also, is it two-directional, meaning that there's been, I think the courtesies are certainly needed to be to the bikers for safety, but also in reverse, the cyclists have to be courteous to the cars.
Yes.
Is it planning on a kind of a golden rule kind of approach?
Right. Yeah, we're looking to have that mutual respect between the cars and bicyclists.
And the rules to be, I guess, explained and then followed.
Right. And that's what the committee is being formed for, is to maintain that safety.
Well,
I just wanted to ask, is it the idea to be a permanent committee, or would you be a committee with kind of a mission, and then when you finish working, you dissolve?
Right, well, we'll start off as a permanent committee. I think there's always room for improvements, and eventually we may start working with other cities that border us to try and connect paths together, and we can put on our growing map of bicycle paths in and out of Burr Ridge. So I think it'll develop into a more of a permanent committee.
okay. Any discussion? Would you care to make a motion?
Oh, so I'd like to make a motion to create a bicycle committee.
Second?
A motion and a second. Any discussion? Roll call, please.
Trustee Scampa?
Yes.
Trustee Model?
I'm not the second.
Sorry.
Guy was the second.
We've got Trustee Francis with the second.
Trustee Francis?
Yes.
Trustee Model?
Yes.
Trustee Baveza?
Yes.
Trustee Snyder?
Yes.
5-0.
We have here an official bicycle committee.
Thank you.
Staff will meet with trustee Schiappa and some of the residents and kind of flesh this out a little bit, number of people and some of the parameters for the committee and what they'll be working on, and then report back to the village board on that.
All right, well, thank you, trustee and Louisa, for driving that. Under other considerations, for announcement, deliberation, and/or discussion, no official action will be taken. Anything else? Section for residents, I'm sorry, trustee Francis.
Yes, I have two things. First of all, on April 11th, I had the privilege of attending a seminar at the College of DuPage. It was titled 10 Best Legal Practices Every Elected Official Should Know. I attended it with Commissioner Hawk from the Plan Commission, Zoning Board of Appeals, and Pathway Commission. And it was presented by Julie Tappendorf. She's an attorney with a law firm that specializes in municipal law. And it was an excellent presentation. A lot of salient bullet points. Many things I learned. Many things were clarified for me. Great question and answer session. And I'll go ahead and scan in my notes and the outline and pass it off to Doug, and he can hand it out to all of you. But I do encourage the other trustees and the other commissioners to attend if it is offered again in the future. The second item is that there's no non-resident comments section on this agenda. Shouldn't be overlooked.
Yeah, I apologize for that. I did not realize that until now. Thank you.
Anybody else? Another section for residents' comments. Any additional residents like to address the board? Reports and communications from village officials? Seeing none? Well, we're now going to go into closed session to discuss the approval of closed session minutes of March 26, 2018, consideration of release of closed session minutes of September 25th, 2017, and January 8th, 2018, deliberation of salary schedules and benefits for one or more classes of employees, and employment of employees. So thank you very much for joining us this evening.
Point of order, Mayor, real quick, did you want the non-resident comment section? I don't think we have any, but just...
I think he asked if anybody.
Okay, I heard residents, I didn't know if it...
I didn't hear non-residents.
Okay, well, thank you very much for joining us tonight. Official vote to go into closed session?
Yeah.
Oh, that's right. The general public meeting, we don't.
If there was
Okay,
somebody, you know.
all those in favor going into closed session?
No, we don't have a first and a second yet.
Okay.
Make a motion to go on, make a motion to.
Closed session.
I'll make a motion to go into closed session.
Okay, somebody second.
Who's second? Joe?
Okay.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any nays? Thank you, sorry.